Hello, Professor Little. This is my response to the space race is over. I guess I found the whole thing incredibly interesting because I'd never really thought of kind of how the process of going from planet A to planet B would be relatively fruitless if we had to leave planet A. So I guess the first paragraph or first part that really stuck out to me was this time in reference to how us thinking about going to space travel in the modern time rather than in the 50s when it was more fantastical. This time it is not our next exciting adventure, but our final hope. In that we have many have abandoned the concept of taking care of what we have and fixing what we've necessarily done, and that we really need to just kind of hightail it out of here because that's the only realistic option because humans are growing and so are our needs. So of course, new planet, more people, it makes sense. Yeah, that is a little bit that's a little bit worrisome to think that the idea of taking care of the closest livable planet to us, or I mean that I think we even really know about, that we can make any relative contact within the next billion years, we're totally ready to just walk away from and replay the same script, as he has well said. Something I thought was very interesting, I took a little bit of a dive into Anthropocene, I believe that's how it's pronounced, the age of humans, how there were many eras in the world, say like the Ice Age. The invention of the wheel was a relative one, that's not necessarily an era, but that everything is sort of marked now by how we live on the earth and the relevance of us being here, that we are the most important factor. Well, we're the most relevant thing on here, whether that's good or bad. Whether that's good or bad, we are the most relevant piece on Earth, aside from Earth existing. Very interested on how many different eras, or I guess how the races traveled from northern Africa all the way around. I also thought it was funny how the map started with Africa on the left and the Americas on the right, because I hadn't seen that before. So that was cool to see. Something on the same concept on how that first paragraph, this time is not our next exciting adventure, but our final hope, and that people who believe that going to a new planet is our final hope, the only thing we have left, the only next real step besides saving the planet, which is not an option. George Orwell said, or finished a quote on, only an intellectual could, that idea could be so absurd, only an intellectual could believe them, those ideas. I find that very terrifying, that to rationalize an irrational thought by saying it is due to a higher level of thinking. That just seems very much to abandon logic, which is very ironic to say that you'd be an intellectual. Would hope that that would mean highly logical, but that only an intellectual could believe them, those crazy ideas. Not terribly surprised, I guess, that that is where the revolutionaries sit themselves, as highly intellectual, because only they see so far in the future, and if you can't, you're inept. Lots of lacking introspection on that one, I feel. Then the probably the final part that I was really blown away by was, to every dollar consumed relatively, whether it's a good or service, 75 cents on that dollar is from the planet. And I imagine that's whether it's from dams that we are using, the wind. I don't know if it scopes as far into like mining, if we can say that the money made on the mine versus the labor for the coal, or how that would kind of play back and forth, was very interesting, and that the earth is effectively a business, because if we can consider we're on scale to say that we are 25% of all things we consume compared to Earth being only 75, I'd say that's pretty impressive. And we're originally, it was only a fraction of a decimal of an integer, just the smallest amount was us bringing forth, but now we are a whole 25% of what we do rather than all being fed off the earth. Very worrisome. I can only imagine how much the planet can sustain on that.